It's time to step into the Coming Out Lounge, a cool, safe space to be true to your sexual self. With your host, Rick Clemens. Rick has helped hundreds of people come out of the closet, and now each week he's bringing you cool insights for loving and accepting yourself, boosting your self-confidence, and living a guilt-free, purpose-filled life on the other side of the closet doors. Cuddle up with yourself and get ready for heartwarming coming out stories, ideas for living authentically, and tips for being fully self-expressed. Now here's your host, Coming Out Coach Rick.
Hello, Closet Busters. It's time once again to stop the closet dwelling and to step out, step up, and step into living your truth. And I have to say that sometimes living your truth can get a little messy. Sometimes it can take you to some places that make you feel like you're the last person standing on earth who really, truly gets you. And other times, standing in your truth can lead you to have to make some very critical decisions about who you are and how you show up in the world. But what is really shocking is when going to live your truth and stand in it gets tested by people and organizations and situations outside of ourselves. And today we're going to talk about one of those situations that recently has affected a lot of people across the country and the world. And it's something that's putting a lot of people in a place of really having to think about how they relate to their faith and to people they love and people they truly care about. And I'm not going to give a lot of detail because I'm going to bring the expert in who's actually living this right now in his own life. He happens to be a very special person to me. He's been a client of mine off and on for a couple of years. I've gone through the journey with him of him finding himself and being himself and taking some big, brave, bold steps to step into that place of saying, I am truthfully a gay man. I've watched him grow. I've watched him fall and trip. And each time I've seen him pick himself up and just keep moving forward. He's a beautiful man. He has 4 kids. He's been married twice. Once he was married for 13 years to the mother of his children. He most recently married the man of his dreams in the last year. He's a doctor. He's a guy who serves our country by being in the Army as a doctor in that arena. He lives in the D.C. area, and he happens to also be a Mormon. And we're going to talk through what that really means for him and what has happened with the decisions the Mormon Church has recently made. So today I'd like to bring someone, like I said, who's really special to me, my client Sterling, to the show. Thanks for being here today, Sterling.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's really good. It's always good to be with you. And, you know, when this was all unfolding, you reached out to me and you shared some stuff with me and we talked a little bit. And this was really something that I could tell was really giving you a lot of angst and pain in your life, as anything would when we know who we are and we know at our deepest layers that piece of us that just is who we're meant to be, and then suddenly something outside of us starts to say, well, you can be that, but then there's going to be a deeper price to pay, so to speak. So let's kind of walk into what happened just in the last couple of weeks. So basically the Mormon Church has put some new doctrines or things in place that really is affecting you, your family, and your children. So why don't you talk the listeners through, from your own personal perspective, what the church has put into play that's really having an effect on your life?
All right.
Oh, come on. I know it's not fun, but yeah, I know it's going to be a biggie. So just kind of give us the story and share with us what you feel like sharing. Okay, man?
All right. I had actually gotten a text from one of my dear friends who was a Mormon missionary with me, who had stated, he basically asked, hey, have you seen the latest news? Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what he was talking about. So he sent me a link, and at first I thought it might have just been, you know, something that someone was saying about the Mormon Church. He was angry. Right. But as I learned more about it, you know, this was really happening. And what they had stated was, the original saying was, any children of same-sex couples could no longer be baptized. They could no longer get a baby blessing. basically they weren't really going to be able to be members of this culture or this church until they were 18 years old. And then, and only then, if they decided they wanted to be baptized at 18, they could no longer be living with those same-sex couple, whether they were in college or they'd been living with them the entire time. And they also could not, they would have to disavow their parents' relationship in order to continue with the Mormon faith. And that kind of hit me with a ton of bricks all at once.
So tell me a little bit more about, why that took you to such a deep place.
Well, I'd grown up Mormon. I had a great love and respect for the church itself. A part of me will probably always be a little bit like that. It's just the way I was raised. And I have 4 beautiful kids. They're wonderful, and they've been so accepting, and they've loved me this entire journey.
Yeah.
And 3 of the 4 had already been baptized before I was divorced. And I had one son who was turning 8, and he was very, very excited to be baptized. All of his siblings were already baptized. All of his cousins were baptized on both sides of the family. His grandparents, everyone he knew basically that was important in his life was a member of this culture. And my heart just broke when I thought that, he is not going to be able to be a part of that group. And I remember myself when I was coming out feeling rejected and not a part of something. And as an adult, that is hard enough, but as a kid, that's a million times worse.
Sure.
And I could only imagine how he must have felt, as me having to tell him, I'm sorry, you can't be like your brothers, you can't be like everyone else because of your dad. Not a choice you made, but because your dad's gay and he decided to get married to another man.
But there's something that you shared with me in a beautiful coming to terms article that you wrote that kind of really put this in play for you, because back when you were younger, there was a part of you who you couldn't really be the football player that everybody was expecting, right?
Yeah.
So suddenly you were already being ostracized in your own way. So what I saw when you shared that with me is like, no wonder this is that deep connection. I mean, I know I've been through this with you as you've come through the closet door, but I started to see a new piece of this, of this really began for you at a very young age, and now it's almost like you're seeing in the mirror this starting to happen for your own son. So that had to be really heart-wrenching to see what he might begin to face.
It was. I guess I could share a little bit. For me, I like analogies. I like stories.
Yeah.
And the way that I really enjoy football. I've always been a little guy, though, and I've never really been able to play. And so the way that I sort of likened this was you have these parents who really want you to be a football player. And while you're really, really good at playing football and you've done a good job, you really don't enjoy it as much. And you want to make your parents happy. You want to make everyone else around you happy. You want to make your team happy. But you have this little secret, and that secret is you secretly just love to dance. And all you've ever really wanted to be was a dancer. But the football players weren't allowed to be dancers. And you've always loved what football has taught you. It's taught you to be athletic. It's taught you teamwork. It's taught you a lot of really good attributes.
Yeah.
And you'll always love that. But you knew when you went and told your parents that you wanted to be a dancer that you were going to be basically excommunicated from their lives.
Right.
You knew ahead of time that they were not going to accept you and you were not going to be okay. But you were still you're still going to take all of that stuff that you learned from being a football player and trying to attribute it to your new life. Mm-hmm. And as you're going along in life, you still love watching football games, and you defend football to all your dancing friends, and all your dancing friends are saying football is stupid. Why would you even defend this stupid game that hates dancers? And for me, it was always just a part of me, and I really, really appreciated it. And then I had these little kids that wanted to be football players. And I, as a dancer, could support them being football players. I knew all the plays.
Right.
I knew how to teach them, to be the best football players that they could be. But then, like the head of the football league or the commissioner came out with this new policy that any kids of dancers could no longer be football players. And so they were losing such great talent. And it broke my heart that because their dad was different, that they couldn't be that. And my heart, I knew that I could never be that football player, but I knew that I could always cheer my kids on the sideline, and I could give them, everything that they needed to be this. And I would always hope secretly deep down that maybe someday that the football players would accept dancers and all of that fun stuff. But when this came out, I really realized that probably wasn't going to be the case, and my children were going to be the ones who had to pay for it.
I love this analogy you just painted, and as I was listening to you, and I hope whoever does listen to this podcast really hears the love behind the story, because it is all about love. It's about loving and caring for your kids in a way that you would do just about anything, but there's also a piece of loving and caring for yourself to show your children what it means to stand up and truly be authentic and be who you're meant to be. So I want to go back just a little bit, because some of our listeners probably aren't familiar with a couple of things that you brought up. So talk a little bit about the baby blessing. Why is that so critical in the Mormon Church?
So in the Mormon Church, it all starts off, you get a name and a blessing in the Mormon Church.
Okay.
And that just sort of sets you up. It sort of gives you a name in the church, sort of puts you in there. At 8 years old, it's the biggest thing for a little Mormon kid is to be baptized. Yeah. Everyone looks forward to it. You're talked ever since I could ever remember. It's something that you're told you're going to be baptized, and this is the best thing in the world that it can ever happen to you. And then after you're baptized, you go on a mission, then you get married, et cetera, et cetera. But that baptism is the foundation for pretty much all little kids' thought processes in the Mormon Church.
Wow. So I'm assuming from what you just shared then, so if he's not blessed and goes through the baptism, then does that prevent him from even going on a mission then?
So he can go on a mission if at 18 years old he decides that he's not going to live with these, with the gay people.
Right.
And he is not...
I like that. So if you don't live with the gays, you're good.
That's
if you
right,
do live
good.
with the gays, then you're screwed.
And not only that, but you have to say, these parents that have loved you and they've raised you, you have to say basically that their marriage is a sham. It's not real. And it is... You have to... They use strong wording. They said disavow. And that is, saying you completely disagree with this.
Yep.
And
that's very strong language. I mean, this isn't, as you're telling this, I'm thinking, okay, at 8 years old, yeah, you probably get the concept of disavow only because everyone around you will be saying it's a bad thing. But I don't know that you can actually take that word in and completely understand at that age what that truly means. You're going to basically have to say to your parent or parents, depending on the situation, what you are and who you are is just horrible. It can't be. It's not seen under any of the church laws. It's just a complete sin. That's what it's basically saying. You are done. Is that pretty much the way it is?
It is, and they tried. I tried very, very hard to understand what they were coming from. They said it was for protection.
Yeah, but what are we protecting? That's the thing.
To me, that just it stabbed my heart. Here I am, a father. You know, my ex-wife and I, we're trying to maintain a relationship. We're trying to heal. We're trying to give the kids the best life possible. We've both agreed that, you know, that he could be baptized in the Mormon church. And then the Mormon church says, no matter, you know, if they are living with the same-sex couple,
right,
they cannot be baptized.
Wow.
And to me, that was a slap in the face because they said it was for protection, but they're not protecting other kids who are not from Mormon families or families that are divorced or families of fornicators or families of, you know, so many things. All those people are not excluded, but you are targeting a certain group of people. We all know you don't agree with same-sex marriages.
Right.
But this was one step further.
Yeah. Well,
And
this
so
is
I think
where...
that's what hurt.
And this is where I think a lot of, you know, whether it's the Mormon church or the Catholics or the Baptists or whomever, you know, any fundamental Christian churches out there, this is where I call they pick from the buffet of beliefs and say, okay, we can do this, but this we can't. And I know for me personally, this has been one of my biggest challenges in my own belief system, raised as a Seventh-day Adventist, where I don't understand, and it's not just Seventh-day Adventists or Mormons. I see it everywhere I go, every church, because I've been a lot of church-dwelling buffets. You know, I've been like, okay, I'm going to the buffet of churches, and I'm going to see if I can find somebody that I want to basically break bread and eat and have wine together with, right? You know, if they don't have wine, that's definitely a church that's just out of my realm already. But
no Mormons for you.
Yeah, exactly, done. But you know, what I find so fascinating is how, and I know it's human nature, because I know I'm not perfect and I know I do this as well in different ways, but how we start to pick, okay, well, this one, no, absolutely, that person can't be included. But, well, okay, we'll make some room for them and them, even though maybe the doctrines don't say, if you follow the doctrines, you follow the doctrines, you follow the doctrines, whether it's the Mormon doctrines or, you know, the Christian, whatever it is. I love how people just handpick, okay, well, this is going to be the thing. And I find it really unfortunate, especially in this case where you're putting the weight of the decision on a child at a very young and impressionable age that they now have to basically carry with them for the next 10 years.
Yep.
And I just can't help but wonder how carrying that weight alone is going to affect that child in so many ways. Mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, you know. It's kind of like saying, okay, and I don't want to compare this, but it's one that I think can be kind of compared is, it's like telling a child, don't tell anybody that, you know, an adult is having sexual relations with you, and just don't say that, and it'll all be fine. You know, it's like saying, don't do this. You can't do this. You got to carry this. It's horrible for a child.
Well, you're telling someone this is the root of, you know, beliefs in general, and religion is supposed to be personal. It's supposed to, people are supposed to think for themselves.
Right.
But here's something where they're telling you how to think and telling you how to feel, that you have to agree with this certain instance in order to even be a member of the church.
Yeah. And I think it's fascinating because I have been through something somewhat similar. I mean, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the baptism, there wasn't a certain age, but by a certain age, it was like, okay, if you haven't decided to be baptized, then what's going on? You don't actually become a, quote, member of the church until you're baptized. But I found it really compelling because I think I was probably 15 or 16. I can't remember exactly when I was baptized. But as I went through that process, and at the time I was very very tied to my church. I thought, okay, now this has happened. Wow, I'm at that milestone. But then that milestone almost was the moment I also began to go, so what else though? What else do I believe and not believe? And I think it was the beginning of me opening myself up to question many, many things. And I'll be the first to admit, there are doctrines of my faith that I still hold to. And I know that's kind of where you're at in your own journey right now. You hold to many of the doctrines and beliefs, even though at this stage I would assume you're not a member of the church, correct?
No, that was another thing that was put out where I think this hurt a lot of people as well. Where if you are in a gay relationship, specifically a marriage, you're considered apostate. And in the Mormon religion, that's a huge word. That's like one of the worst words you can be. That puts you in the category of murderers, rapists, the worst sort of type of group of people. And it's not if you're gay. It is specifically towards same-sex marriages. And that's what they put in there. So they put all these horrible things and same-sex marriage. So they make it... In my mind, I don't care if you have multiple partners or whatever. And in the Mormon religion, the main thing is family.
Right.
And they're saying that if you decide to have, multiple one-night stands as a gay person, you're not apostate and you aren't subject to church discipline. Mm-hmm. But if you get married and do what you're taught to do, and you have this family value, and you get married, that is when you have become apostate.
Got it.
And that is when it is a mandatory church discipline at that point. I knew at that point, I knew I couldn't be a member anymore. I had to take my name off the records, and I know for my family, it's very, very difficult. It's a very, very close-knit society. And there's going to be a lot of backlash, unfortunately, because you're not really supposed to associate with apostates.
Right.
You can, in the Mormon terms, you can love them, but you can't really accept them.
Right.
And so
that's got to be really difficult and driving a wedge.
It's very hard. And then I've got my kids who now know that their dad is an apostate.
Right.
And in the Mormon church, they're being told, that their dad, who married another guy who they love very, very much, are in the same category as murderers or rapists and everything else that they hear are the most terrible things.
So I'm going to ask you a question real quick, though. Listening to this and knowing the magnitude and the hurt and the confusion it's bringing on, I'm also thinking, but what's the opportunity here? There's a beautiful opportunity here, and
there have been a lot of opportunities. And if you want to do religion side, if you want to do personal side, there was a big backlash right off the bat from this. People right off the bat knew this was wrong. We're talking your hardcore fundamental Mormons were like, whoa, step back. This is not right. Mm-hmm. Within a couple of days, they already had an amendment. They called it a clarification to the policy. Really, it was a little bit of a change. Some of the basics they still stood by their words, saying we don't agree with same-sex marriage. People who are in those relationships still need to be kicked out. Mm-hmm. But they did change it to if a kid lives even 51% of the time with a parent who's not in a same-sex marriage, could get married. I mean, it could become baptized.
So is it baptized at 18 or is it...
8.
Okay,
as an 8-year-old.
Okay, awesome.
And so there have been some changes just from the backlash of this. It was pretty significant. But they still say, so if let's say my ex-wife died, or my kids want to come live with me, which is a very big possibility, because we do have that sort of open house rule where our kids can do that. And then what then? Or other situations like me, where the kids do spend a lot of time with their same-sex couple, family, and they can't be, they will be excluded. So there are so many things that still need to change, but there at least have been little changes with that. For me personally, it really made me continue to stand up for what I believe. I've never been political. I've been taught, since I was a little kid,
Yep.
you don't ask questions, you do what you're told, and just keep moving forward. And for the first time, I called it out. I said, hey, I don't believe this is right.
All right.
I've got a son who's in this situation, and you're telling him that he's not good enough to be a part of a culture that he's raised up in. Mm-hmm. What is this going to do to him? Mm-hmm. And it's been good because I'm finally able to acknowledge there is a difference where I don't just have to sit back and I don't just have to say and be a pacifist about everything.
Right.
And my kids, they're learning as well. They stand up to people. My oldest, right off the bat, is like, I've got 2 gay dads. I love them very much. And he introduced us to all of his teachers, and they all knew who the dads were. And so we're seeing a generation change, and that's where it sort of needs to start. We may not be able to change the older generations, but this younger generation is seeing something.
Well, I think the younger generation is becoming the and so what generation. They're becoming the and then what, and I think it's because eyes are wider open. I mean, I look at from my generation to my kids' generation, and my kids are in their teens and early 20s. There's definitely a much bigger shift. And then I'm sure your kids, at the age they are, there's even a bigger shift starting to happen. And so when I asked the question, what's the opportunity, you just brought it forward. The opportunity is being able to help people start to question and make decisions and come into their life the way they want to come into life. I think the hardest thing that I ever did was to say, okay, I'm going to let my kids figure this out. I'm going to let them, if they want to explore religion and they want to do this. Yes, we kind of went to church a little bit, but we weren't going to church. I mean, when I was married, we weren't going to church at any specific religion. We were kind of bopping around wherever it felt good. We went to some of the mega churches here in California. And then I realized, you know what? The one thing I wish I'd always had was the freedom to choose. And now that I have given that to my children, they're figuring it out. In fact, I just had a conversation today with my youngest daughter in the car coming home from school about that sort of thing. And it was a very powerful conversation because I could see and hear her own thought processes choosing. So we're about to get to the end of the episode here, but there's a couple of things I really want to just bring out because you've been, first of all, brave. You have stepped out again out of your shell when you hit me up and started talking about this, and I saw your Facebook posts, and we started talking about writing an article, and then I offered you the opportunity to come talk on the podcast. I was like, he's really going, and I'm, you don't need me to be proud of you. I just have to say I have to truly admire you, Sterling, from whence we came to where you are now. You are just continuing to step in and step out and step up into living your truth. I know that's the whole thing about Coming Out Lounge, but that's really what you're doing. But the question I have for you is, what would be the thing you most would like to be able to do, given where this all has landed so far? What would be the thing you'd like to be able to do to make a difference?
I just want to make people think. I want them to really be able to really focus on what do they really believe. And I think I got very frustrated when I realized I'd been so indoctrinated with, you have to think a certain way. And now my kids are being told the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids are the most important thing in the world to me. And I want them to be able to choose for themselves what is going to be happening with their lives. And if they like it, that's great. I will support them 100%. But if they don't, I'm right by their side as well.
That's awesome.
And I just wish a lot more, parents in general would be like that, and and supportive of their kids, and thinking how much good, how much progress we could make if we focused on the good attributes and really focused on trying to help improve versus focusing on why something is wrong all the time.
Well, as a parent, I can't help but agree with you more. And I know as a parent, I'm not the perfect parent, but I've always tried to think, how can I let my kids be more themselves and, really just be themselves, which ironically is part of what I stand on the platform of. But I think it's really important as parents that we do that. So it's been a couple of years since you and I got to know each other and worked through a lot of your journey. And now here we are having this kind of conversation. This is the Coming Out Lounge, as you know, and one of the questions I always ask at the end of each episode is, what is something you would like to leave with the listener who may be questioning coming out, maybe in the midst of it, not quite ready, but almost there to the door, maybe they're just on the other side of the door? What piece of advice would you love to leave with the listeners today?
I can honestly say, coming from a very conservative standpoint, that I have never been happier in my life because I am no longer afraid. I was always afraid that someone would find out I was gay. I was always afraid. That was my deepest fear, more than death itself. And now that fear is no longer there, and I'm here and I'm still okay, I'm thriving. And my self-esteem has never been better. And my life has never been more genuine. And I just want to say, I want people to find that, whatever that truth is, because from where I was before, it was a life of doing what I was told and being who I was supposed to be. And now I really am being who I'm supposed to be, not by someone else's standards, but my kids can see it, and I can see it, and my family is slowly starting to see it.
Yeah.
And no matter how hard it is, it always gets better. I know that sounds so cliche.
Yeah, but it does.
But it really, really does. I got married to someone I never thought I would be able to.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd be able to be married to a guy. Here I am, married to another doctor, and we're two happy little gay guys, sitting around, living the life we always wanted to, with the people that we want to.
That's awesome. Well, I have to tell you, you have taken a big step once again. You filled my heart with a huge amount of joy to be able to share you with the world. And I just have to tell you how much I love and care for you, my friend. And thank you so much for being here and taking the time to be on the Coming Out Lounge today.
Thank you so much for everything you've done for me, too.
Oh, absolutely. And I have to say, I thank you listeners that continue to show up each week and listen to the stories and the guidance and the different ways we talk you through coming out of those closet doors and living life beyond. And if you have really been touched by what Sterling and I have shared with you today, we always appreciate a little bit of love wherever you're tuning in, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud. If you feel compelled, and only if you feel compelled, we sure would appreciate some reviews or ratings in those areas. And as always, catch me on the Coming Out Coach on Facebook. You can always find me there. And if you'd really like to share us with the world, Twitter's a great place to do it. You can just use my handle at Rick Clemens, and the hashtag for the show is the Coming Out Lounge. And one thing I wanted to start to share with the listeners too is just around the bend here, coming in February 2016, my first book is coming out. It's called Frankly, My Dear, I'm Gay. It's a late bloomer's guide to coming out. I'm really excited to be sharing this with the world, and I can't wait to share it with anyone who listens to the show. And I think with that, we're going to pretty much release everything to the universe to bring us back next week in the way we should. And with that, I'm going to say, I really encourage you to go out there and never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping into living your powerful truth. I'm Rick Clemens, the Coming Out Coach, and you've been listening to the Coming Out Lounge. We will catch you next week.
You've just experienced the Coming Out Lounge. Go online to www.comingoutlounge.com to learn more, and tune in again next week for more stories and tips for being true to yourself.